In this episode, we discuss aviation emissions. Here are a few facts and statistics to begin with. Aviation is one of the fastest growing sources of greenhouse gas emissions driving global climate change. Worldwide, flights produced 915 million tons of CO2 in 2019, while transporting 4.5 billion passengers. Over 80% of aviation CO2 emissions are emitted from flights that are over 1,500 kilometers, for which there is simply no practical alternative mode of transportation. The International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, has endeavored to reduce aviation emissions as follows. Every 3 years, ICAO organizes a major environmental event to share information on the latest developments in the area of aviation and environment with its member states and other key stakeholders. The purpose of these events is to inform and facilitate environment-related discussions and high-level decision-making at ICAO's triennial assemblies. At the 38th session of the ICAO Assembly in September 2013, the ICAO Symposium on Aviation and Climate Change that was dubbed Destination Green was held as a special event. Destination Green provided a unique opportunity to gain knowledge and exchange information on the key areas of ICAO's environmental protection activities. It also encouraged states to continue to build upon these milestones through the following instruments. 1. States' action plans to reduce CO2 emissions. 2. ICAO's strategy on assistance to states. 3. New technology standards, including the CO2 standard for aircraft. 4. Sustainable alternative fuels for aviation. And 5. Market-based measures to reduce aviation emissions. A notable tool adopted by member countries as a solution to reduce aviation emissions is carbon trading. The dynamic described in the image triggers the carbon trading market, also known as cap and trade or emissions trading. Cap and trade programs are a type of flexible environmental regulation that allows organizations and markets to decide how best to meet policy targets. This is in contrast to command and control regulations. A central authority, usually a regional or governmental body, allocates or sells a limited number of permits that allow discharge of a specific quantity of a specific pollutant over a set period of time. As shown in the diagram, polluters are required to hold permits in amounts equal to their emissions. Polluters that want to increase their emissions must buy permits from others willing to sell them. In this regard, Europe included emissions from flights to and from the continent in its emissions trading system, a cap and trade scheme which would see the number of pollution permits decrease to zero over time. However, strong international opposition stoked by industry within and outside Europe forced the EU in late 2012 to exempt from the scheme all flights to and from Europe. This remains the case today, with exemption now set to continue until at least 2024. Another notable tool of ICAO is the Carbon Offsetting and Reduction Scheme for International Aviation, CORSIA for short. In October 2016, ICAO agreed the outlines of a global market-based measure to address CO2 emissions from international aviation, starting as a voluntary measure from 2021. CORSIA aims to stabilize CO2 emissions at 2020 levels. The measure will be voluntary until 2027 and mandatory on nearly all states thereafter until 2035. However, CORSIA's target will be achieved through purchase of offsets or use of alternative fuels. Offsets involve paying other sectors to reduce aviation entities' emissions rather than the aviation entities reducing their own emissions. It has failed to work in the past, and it most likely won't work in the future either, as the Paris Agreement requires all sectors to cut their emissions. This leaves no room for one sector, including the aviation industry, to find cheap ways to offset their emissions by paying another sector to cut its emissions instead. Unfortunately, therefore, CORSIA is bound to fail. The more effective tool in this regard is direct carbon capture. Carbon capture can in general be described as shown in the diagram. Although we currently do not have the details, it is encouraging to note that aircraft carrier United Airlines of the United States has embarked on a carbon capture project aiming to be 100% green by 2050. As far as alternative fuels are concerned, aviation biofuel has until recently been a promising alternative fuel. Aviation biofuel is considered by some to be the primary means by which the aviation industry can reduce its carbon footprint. After a multi-year technical review from aircraft makers, engine manufacturers, and oil companies, biofuels were approved for commercial use in July 2011. However, it is highly unlikely that ICAO will be able to put in place the sort of safeguards needed to ensure only those fuels which deliver real emission reductions are used. Of course, the efforts to encourage flying less in order to reduce aviation emissions also have to be recognized. These include the following. 1. Use of virtual platforms such as Skype, Zoom, WebEx, Connect, and GoToMeetings. 2. Organizing regional hub conferences. That is, instead of a single in-person national or international meeting, a professional association or other organization could convene at multiple regional sites linked digitally for major events like keynotes and award ceremonies. 3. Hold fewer conferences. Convening conferences every other year instead of annually automatically halves the carbon output. 4. Invite speakers to give talks remotely to make sure the visits still provide opportunity for conversation. Speakers might have a virtual meeting with colleagues, and so on. However, even with all the foregoing efforts, aviation currently continues to be the industry with the fastest growing CO2 emissions, except for a brief slowdown due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This therefore makes the development of the following technologies of cardinal importance. The first of these technologies is turning sunlight into renewable aviation fuel. This is being attempted by the German Aerospace Center that has launched a new project focused on producing renewable transportation fuels from water and carbon dioxide using concentrated sunlight. The second technology is a concept unveiled by aircraft manufacturer Airbus as the world's first zero-emission commercial aircraft. Airbus has revealed 3 concepts for zero-emission commercial aircrafts that would be powered by hydrogen and could be in service by 2035. In the meantime, though, passenger jets could be flying in formation just like birds do in order to save energy. It's called wake energy retrieval. Groups of airplanes meet and form a close V-shaped formation. The air upwash from the aircraft ahead lifts the following airliner, saving fuel, effectively copycatting the in-flight formation of our avian cohabitants. We at Environ Campus are enthusiastic and very hopeful that these technologies will come to fruition in time to save the planet from self-destruction. If you have not yet subscribed to Environ Campus, please do so. Also, if you like this particular video, please give us a thumbs up.